20 years of silence surrounded the tragedy of Black Hollow Mine until a quiet veteran and his loyal dog uncovered the truth. Marcus Reed, the man sworn to guard the secret, had hidden a cover-up that robbed families of answers and justice. But John Harper refused to let the deception stand, gathering proof and confronting Reed in front of the whole town. Just wait until you hear how John and Rex's relentless pursuit revealed the shocking truth and brought justice back to Cedar Ridge. John Harper had never been a man of many words. At 58, his life had settled into a quiet rhythm, one shaped by years in the Army and by the stillness of his small hometown, Cedar Ridge, Colorado. After retiring, he traded uniforms for worn boots and his days for long walks with Rex, his loyal German shepherd. The dog had been his companion since returning home, a steady presence that filled the silence of a life that had once been defined by orders and missions. Cedar Ridge was a town carved from stone and history. Nestled in a valley surrounded by pines, it carried the scent of earth and rain. At the edge of town, where the ground dipped toward a hollow, lay the Black Hollow Mine. Once a thriving vein of copper and silver, it had closed abruptly decades ago after a collapse claimed the lives of 20 miners. The mine had since become a place of whispered stories, rumors of strange happenings, of sounds deep within the earth, and of shadows that seemed to move without cause. Few dared approach it, and most avoided the area entirely. On a late autumn evening, as a fog crept into the valley, John followed his usual route along a gravel trail near the mine. The air was heavy and damp, carrying the faint scent of pine and cold stone. Rex moved at his side, tail low, nose to the ground. But then the dog froze. His ears pricked forward, his body stiffened. John slowed his pace. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, adjusting the strap on Rex's leash. The dog growled softly, a deep, deliberate sound that made John's skin tighten. Rex's eyes fixed on the mine entrance, the darkness seeming to pull him in. Then, without warning, Rex barked sharply, low and urgent. John frowned, squinting through the fog. The mine mouth yawned like a dark wound in the hillside, the entrance blocked years ago by heavy timber and stone. No one had stepped inside for decades. Yet Rex barked again, more insistently this time, his stance unrelenting. It was as if he sensed something unseen. Curiosity stirred in John, mixed with unease. He remembered the stories the old miners told over beers at the tavern, stories of strange noises, vanished equipment, and unexplainable lights deep in the mine. Rationally, John knew it was probably nothing, but there was something in Rex's behavior that gnawed at him. The dog wasn't one to bark without cause. That night, John sat alone in his small cabin. Rain tapped softly against the windows. He stared at the photographs on his mantel, pictures of younger days in the Army, of comrades now gone, of a life built around discipline and duty. Yet his thoughts kept drifting back to the mine and the way Rex had reacted. That dog had served beside him long enough to sense danger, even when John could not. That instinct had saved him more than once. By midnight, John made his decision. Despite the warnings of friends and the uneasy whisper of old tales, he would go back to Black Hollow Mine. Not for adventure, not for fame, but because something told him there was a truth buried there. A truth Rex was trying to lead him to. John packed a flashlight, a sturdy rope, and a few essentials into his worn backpack. He took Rex's leash and stepped quietly into the night. The fog lay thick over the valley, wrapping the trees and the abandoned mine in a ghostly hush. As they approached the entrance, the air grew colder, heavier, as though the darkness itself had a weight. Rex's growl grew louder, sharper, and John felt a shiver run down his spine. He paused at the mouth of the mine, breathing in the damp air. Somewhere deep inside, hidden in shadow, lay a mystery. And John knew, somehow, that this was only the beginning. John stepped into the mine, the beam from his flashlight cutting a narrow path through the thick darkness. The air was sharp, cold, the kind that seemed to seep into his bones. Each step echoed softly against stone walls, carried away by the depths of the cavern. Rex padded beside him silently, ears alert, nose twitching as if tasting the air. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. The scent shifted from cold stone to something metallic, the smell of rust mixed with the faint tang of something long decayed. John tightened his grip on the flashlight. His mind began to replay the old rumors he'd heard about Black Hollow, tales told quietly in the tavern, strange lights deep inside, equipment vanishing without explanation, voices in the dark. But those had always been stories. Now, in this place, something in him said they might be more than just whispers. John's light swept across the walls. That's when he saw it. Markings, faint, carved lines etched into the stone. Symbols that looked almost like a code, a combination of numbers and shapes that made no sense to him. The scratches were old, but deliberate, as if someone had taken the time to leave a message. He crouched closer, brushing away dust to inspect them. Rex stepped forward, low growl rumbling in his chest, his focus locked on the dark stretch ahead. They pressed deeper into the mine, following a narrow corridor that curved downwards. Water dripped somewhere far ahead, and the sound echoed like a slow heartbeat. The air seemed heavier here, almost thick, as if the darkness itself was watching. Then, without warning, the corridor opened into a large chamber, and John froze. The beam of his flashlight swept over a scene that stole his breath. Crates, dozens of them stacked neatly along the walls, each marked with faded stencils and strange symbols. Rusted metal tins, boxes of ammunition, bundles of uniforms folded with precision. But they were unlike anything John had ever seen. The insignias were unfamiliar, strange to his military eye, and the fabric was heavy and worn in ways that spoke of long years underground. He stepped closer, his boots clinking softly on the stone floor. The crates were marked with dates decades old. Inside one, he found sealed ration tins, stacks of medical supplies, and small metal boxes filled with ammunition. Another contained uniforms, coats, and helmets, stitched with insignia that made no sense in any military branch he knew. And then there were the documents, bound bundles of paper tied with frayed string, yellowed with age. John pulled one free. The header read, Operation Silent Echo, Classified. His heart thudded. He flipped through the pages, names, coordinates, orders, and mission details that stretched back into the Cold War era, plans for covert operations that had never been made public. This was not an abandoned mine. This was a secret, a government cache buried and forgotten. Shock rolled over him in waves. His mind raced. Why would such a cache exist here? Why keep it hidden in a mine long after it had closed? And why had Rex been so insistent on leading him here? John began to back away toward the mine entrance, turning slowly as the weight of what he'd discovered sank in. The air seemed to tighten around him. That's when he heard it. A faint sound, distant but deliberate. Footsteps. They weren't coming from him, Not from Rex. They came from deeper inside the mine. John froze. His breath caught in his chest. He strained his ears, the sound growing just enough to be recognizable. Someone, or something, was moving in the darkness behind him. The hair on the back of his neck prickled, and Rex growled sharply, his body tensing beside him. John tightened his grip on his flashlight and his pack. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. Was this discovery a chance encounter or a trap? Whoever was down here with him could not have expected to be found. But John knew one thing. There was no turning back now. Something hidden in the darkness was watching, and John knew he had to find out what it was. John emerged from the mine slowly, his boots crunching against loose gravel, flashlight still in hand. The air outside felt colder now, sharper against his skin, and the fog had grown thicker. His mind was still reeling from what he'd just uncovered: crates of military supplies, uniforms with strange insignias, documents that spoke of covert operations that should have been buried in history. But before he could process it all, movement at the mouth of the mine caught his attention. A figure stood there, leaning slightly against a rock, motionless. John blinked, trying to make out his features. The man wore a black jacket zipped high, his face shadowed in the low light. There was something deliberate about his stance, calm but watchful. His presence was an intrusion, but also a warning. Rex stiffened beside John, ears forward, growling low. The man stepped forward. "John Harper," he said in a quiet, firm voice. "I've been expecting you." John's hand tightened on the flashlight. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Marcus Reed," the man replied, his voice carrying authority. "I'm a government contractor. I've been tasked with guarding this site." A flash of anger surged through John, a heat rising in his chest. "Guarding it?" "This isn't a private property. This is part of this town's history, a history that's been hidden from everyone. Families lost loved ones here, Marcus, and you've been keeping it a secret?" His voice cracked with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Reed didn't flinch. "It wasn't supposed to be found," he said calmly. "The mine wasn't what it seemed. The collapse, it was never an accident." The words hit John like a punch. His heart pounded. "What do you mean?" Reed's eyes didn't waver. "The mine was a cover for a series of experiments that went wrong. This site became something else entirely. The operation was classified, entirely off the record. We buried it to protect lives and secrets, but it cost lives anyway." The betrayal cut deep. John's military instincts flared. Years of service had taught him to read people, to see threats before they struck. Reed wasn't just guarding a mine, he was guarding a lie. And that lie had cost 20 men their lives. Men from this very town. "I've served my country," John said, his voice low but steady. "And I've learned that when people hide the truth, it's the wrong thing. This isn't just about secrecy. It's about betrayal. You've been hiding this from the town, from families who deserve answers." His chest rose and fell with tension. "You don't get to decide what stays buried. We need to know what happened here." Reed's expression hardened. "It's not that simple." The operation was sensitive. There were risks you wouldn't understand. John's teeth clenched. "I understand enough. I understand that people died and their families were left in the dark. That's why I'm not walking away." He stepped closer, his gaze locking with Reed's. "This mine, this secret, belongs to the truth, not to whoever thinks they have the right to keep it hidden." A silence stretched between them. The fog swirled around the mouth of the mine. Rex growled softly, as if sensing the tension. Reed looked at John for a long moment, then spoke again. "You don't know what you're stepping into. This goes far beyond Cedar Ridge. There are forces involved that won't let this come to light. You're risking everything." John's jaw tightened. His voice was firm, even though anger still burned inside him. "If that's true, all the more reason to expose it. I'm not letting this end in silence." In that moment, something shifted in John. The shock from what he had discovered transformed into a burning resolve. Reed's calm demeanor only strengthened his suspicion. This was no isolated incident. It was part of a much larger conspiracy, one that threatened not just Cedar Ridge, but something far beyond. John knew then that his mission was no longer about curiosity. It was about justice, about truth, about making sure what had been hidden in the darkness of Black Hollow was brought into the light. He turned to look at the mine once more, then back at Reed. "I will expose this," he said quietly, "no matter what it takes." After the confrontation with Marcus Reed, John knew he could not let the matter rest. The truth buried in the depths of Black Hollow Mine was too important, not just for him, but for the town, for the families who had lost loved ones, and for the integrity of history itself. He returned home that night with a sense of purpose, his mind still echoing Reed's words and the weight of what he had seen. John began collecting evidence. He photographed the crates, the strange insignia, the stacks of documents. He recorded the markings on the mine walls and the strange corridors hidden deep within. Using his phone, he made voice notes of everything he remembered: the sounds, the smells, the way Rex had reacted. Each piece of evidence was another layer of proof, another step toward the truth. The next morning, he contacted Sarah Myers, a local journalist known for her relentless pursuit of corruption. Sarah had been writing stories about corporate misconduct and government secrecy for years. She listened intently as John told her about Black Hollow, the discovery, and Reed's chilling admission. Sarah's eyes lit with both curiosity and determination. "This is a story people need to hear," she said. "We need proof. And we need witnesses." Together, they worked quickly. Sarah used her contacts to corroborate John's findings. She checked public records, interviewed retired miners, and examined documents John had brought. As the puzzle came together, the picture grew clear. Black Hollow Mine had not been the accident everyone thought. It had been a deliberate cover-up, a secret government operation gone wrong, hidden for decades. Weeks later, the town gathered in the small hall at Cedar Ridge. John and Sarah stood before a crowd, presenting the evidence they had gathered. Photos, documents, recordings, all laid out in plain sight. At first, Marcus Reed was there too, seated quietly, his face unreadable. When the facts were presented, his composure cracked. The denials faded under the weight of proof. Whispers filled the room, a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. By the end of the evening, authorities announced a formal investigation into Black Hollow Mine. The news spread quickly. The town was shaken, but there was a sense of relief. Finally, the truth was out. Finally, justice could begin. For John, the sense of relief was deeper than just exposing a secret. It was the resolution of a burden he hadn't realized he carried. Years of silence about what had happened at the mine had left a wound in Cedar Ridge, a wound now beginning to heal. And in uncovering the truth, John had honored those who had been silenced. The town organized a memorial at the entrance to the mine. Families of the lost miners, townsfolk, and even some of the younger residents who had grown up hearing the legends gathered quietly. A simple plaque was unveiled, listing the names of the 20 miners who had perished. Tears were shed, hands held, and a shared silence wrapped around them. John stood at the edge of the crowd, Rex at his side. His hand rested gently on the dog's head, feeling the steady warmth beneath his fingers. In the quiet of that moment, John thought of everything that had led him here. The years of service, the walks with Rex, the instincts that had guided them both. He looked toward the mine, its mouth still dark, mysterious. Somewhere inside lay the secrets of decades, but now they were no longer hidden. Now the truth was in the open. Rex let out a soft bark, breaking the silence. John smiled faintly. "Yeah, boy," he said quietly. "We found it." For John, relief was not just about the uncovering of hidden truths. It was about closure, a promise kept to a town, to the memories of those lost, and to the bond between a man and his dog who had led him to the heart of something unbelievable. As the crowd dispersed and the fog rolled back in over Cedar Ridge, John stayed by the mine a little longer. Rex rested his head against John's leg, and for the first time in years, John felt a sense of peace. They had walked through fear, through danger, and through the weight of secrets. And now, standing together at the edge of Black Hollow, they were free.